Hey, are you starting over? Completely? I'm with you. It has been almost 6 months since I moved to Canada. Now, this is not the first time I'm starting from zero. At 19 years old, I moved to France, and now, 10 years later, at 29 years old, I'm starting over again. Why? Well, I'm curious to hear your story too, but I'll tell you mine. It all started from my 19 years old self moving to France. I was born and raised in South Korea, and I had no idea what it meant to move to another country. And when you don't know what to expect, you're excited, you're fearless. Just the fact that I had left my home country to live abroad made everything feel special. And looking back now, I realized I had almost nothing at the time. I didn't speak French. The language was difficult. I didn't have a degree yet. No financial assets, nothing. Pretty much like anyone who just stepped into adulthood, I was faced with unsettling choices and very few options. As time went by, I finally got my degree and started working for big companies in France. I had my dream job back then. I saw the Eiffel Tower shining through the window at the office, and with the salary I earned, I was able to support myself. So after 10 years of moving in, I found myself in a comfortable place. My own place, a job, friends, I knew their culture, and I didn't have that much things to do, to be honest. Everything was settled. But I was sad. My heart felt broken in a way that I couldn't quite understand. I felt lost as if I were missing something, but I just didn't know what was missing. For a long time, I was in that state. At some point, something happened within me that undescribable pain surfaced, and once I barely managed to recover and start to heal, I could be more and more honest with myself. As I became more transparent with my thoughts, I felt both healing and a big question mark. Why do I react this way? Why do I feel this way? And what is happening in me? That classic overthinking. And having the questions about life, I decided to go on a long journey to unknown places. I think I needed an adventure to ease my pain or bring up my hope. So I left last year in 2023. My first destination was Canada. I'm going to leave my story about what happened in Canada for another story time, but a year after returning, I made up my mind. I am starting over again from scratch. So as soon as I hit my 29 years old, exactly 10 years since I moved to France, I left. I left everything behind. I threw myself into the same adventure that I had back when I was 19, with no accommodation, no job, and no settled status. And since I moved, going through everything alone was so much more painful than I thought. It was long. Starting from getting all the papers ready, getting a social security number, changing my driver license, finding a temporary place to live. Oh, talking about the driving license, you're going to laugh at me, but one of my biggest fear was driving. I never driven ever my entire life until this year. Because last year, I realized this place is not possible to live without having to drive. So as soon as I came back to Paris, I started taking driving classes. And once I landed back in Canada, I had to drive alone, this time without any teacher. And I don't know if you remember the first time you drove, but it's scary as hell. Yeah, my palms got all sweaty. Or maybe I'm not a natural driver. I always had one of those, be careful, I'm a beginner driver, or I'm sorry, thank you so much for your patience, kind of like warning sign on my car. Two on the back and one in the front, no joke. And I still remember the day I managed to drive back home after getting my first car. That moment with sweaty hands, a pounding heartbeat, and just being happy that I got back home alive. Anyway, next, I started settling into my tiny room. I had to set up my desk so that I could get back to whatever I had to do. IKEA was my friend for a while. Reading that manual and trying to set up new furniture or tools was quite a job. But I think we've all been there. But I must say, it was not the paperwork nor the driving that I found difficult. It was something else that I never expected. I went to a city where I didn't know anyone. As soon as I landed, I had many things to settle, so I barely found time to go out and meet new friends. And I think being alone in this unknown city and not having any friends and going through all of this alone was the perfect setup to experience extreme solitude. I'm a pretty independent person, but that was so hard. My mind was unsettled, everything made me feel anxious. I found myself stuck in a constant state of fight or flight mode. I had to reflect on what I needed the most more than what I wanted. I made a commitment to myself, and there's a reason that I'm here. I had to pull myself together. So I started to think, okay, what do I need? I had zero foundation. So I had to find a long-term accommodation, secure my status, secure a job, basically everything. So I started by focusing on my career. Within a month or two of moving to Canada, I found myself going through the hiring process with big companies. I felt so lucky. I kept telling myself that I'd get at least one of these opportunities as long as I managed to hold myself together. I forced myself to believe that everything will work out. Yet, deep down, I couldn't help but think, if it doesn't, I'm doomed. And my anxiety surged within me. And you know what happens when you're desperate? You become really bad at controlling your emotions. I suppressed my anxious thoughts and tried to ignore them instead of accepting that I am anxious. And that is another way to say that I was not honest with myself and I was not there for me. So who's gonna comfort you if you can't even comfort yourself? The result? Nothing. 2 months of working hard vanished just like that. And of course, I had no time and made no effort to meet new friends or maintain any sense of balance in my life. I felt so lonely. I missed my family and my friends. Something about that start just didn't click, as if I was in the wrong place. So I went back to Toronto, the place where it all began last year. When I was getting ready to move to Toronto, I made a promise to myself I wouldn't lose any balance by being obsessed with one thing or letting desperation take over. I started working out again and got back into my hobbies. And I told myself, this might take longer than I think. I need to feel good and be ready. So remember, you want to feel good along the way, and that's gonna sustain you in this journey. As I moved back to Toronto, I needed a place where I could call home. I literally moved 3 times and went back and forth between Canada and France twice within 4 months of crossing the continent. After my 3rd move, I finally found somewhere I could temporarily settle. It was just a tiny room, but I knew it was the start of something new. Now, if you ever had an experience of moving abroad, you know how important it is to secure your status. Until you have that paper with you, you feel unstable. Well, it all depends on the country you live in, but here in Canada, to get your residency card, languages are primary qualification. So I began preparing for the language test, going back and forth to library. I felt like I was becoming a student again after so many years. And in the meantime, I received a response from a company where I had applied to some time ago. By that time, I was no longer desperate to get a job, but instead, I was focusing on finding a good balance in my life. As my priorities shifted, I felt calm because the desperation that I felt once was no longer there. And let me tell you something funny about this. As I was speaking to the company, I felt enormous growth since the last time I went through a job process. It was not wasted. And this is not the first time that I felt this. Since I moved to Canada, I have started to experience the power of compounding. Well, it was the first time that I had to take the wheel and push through. Many times I felt like I might faint. I was worried that I might cause an accident, but I was alone. So I had to keep going. 5 months later, driving became my second nature. Who would have ever expected that a wimp like me, could now drive like this? And oh my goodness, the job process. The very first time I had an interview with a Canadian company, I was in Paris and I was so clueless. No surprise, the interview was a mess. Also, I didn't trust myself back then. So after moving to Canada, I started asking for help. Each time I practiced, I analyzed what I was lacking from the previous experiences and worked on them. My preparation notes grew from just a line or two to full page of details. And over time, I became somewhat of an expert when it comes to interviews. So 2 months of failures turned out to be a valuable warm-up. I failed at a round, now managed the second round, now the final round, but I always felt like I was being chased. I kept feeling more and more exhausted. So I went out to see my soulmate friend slash sister here, Julie. I don't exactly remember the context, but in the middle of our conversation, there was this point where I said, I'm not proud of myself. And in that moment, Julie's face seemed a bit shocked. She asked me, aren't you proud of yourself? And after that talk, her reaction kept resurfacing in my mind from time to time. Was I proud of myself? Am I proud of myself? I don't know. I became desperate again to pass the test, to pass this, to make this happen. If I don't succeed now, like right now, it's over. And that mindset didn't help. So I was telling you about this language test, right? And you know, the test turned out to be easier than I expected. But because of that desperate mindset, I couldn't keep myself together and had to spend time trying to calm down the pounding thump of my heart rather than focusing on the test. As I left the test center, my face was clouded with worry. And right after the test, I had to get back to that focused mode to finish up the final round of the interview. So a day before my interview, I went to a coffee shop to work on my presentation. I sat down for hours and hours, and before I knew it, the sky was dim and it was dark outside. And on my way back, I realized that I was walking on the exact same road that I had walked last year. And I remember one evening on that road, I felt deeply sad. The process of healing was so painful, and that brought me back to the same emotion I felt at the time. So I started to document myself, and I was no longer sad, so that kind of helped me. But I felt that pain again, like so intensely. I couldn't understand where it was coming from. Like, is it the sadness of adulthood, realizing that life is harder than we imagine? Or is it the sadness of solitude, realizing that life is meant to be shared, but in the end, we all walk our own path alone? I just wanted to collapse and cry my heart out. And I asked myself this question again: am I not proud of myself? Then I realized why I was not proud of myself. I was always chasing after the results. I wanted to grow, but I never took the time to look back at how much I've grown. I was fixated on the result, which is why I was never satisfied. It was clear why I felt this way. Goals by nature remain just out of reach until they are achieved, but I focused only on the outcome and ignored everything else along the way. I was lacking true love for myself. The constant reminders to tell myself, I love you, were nothing more than self-affirmation meant to force the idea. Deep down, I kept believing that I wasn't enough, that I was lacking. I gave myself conditional love that came with strings attached. No wonder why my heart felt empty. So I started reflecting on the process. Driving and navigating the job search were some of the most visible surface level examples of how I was growing. I did evolve. I was proud of myself. And that day, I saw my 19 years old self doing 2 part-time jobs to finance my studies and living costs, and walking down the street at midnight after work. And yet I was so happy, so freaking happy, because the journey was fun. I love the journey itself. To anyone who's starting over again, be proud of your journey. The beauty of starting over lies in the fact that you can see your evolution more than at any other time. I'm 29 years old and I'm starting from scratch.